here and welcome to this workshop at Temple City Council for October 7th, 2021. It's currently 3 p.m. Let's go ahead and get started. Did anybody sign up to? Okay, so we have no public comments. We'll move on to item number 2, which is to discuss as may be needed in the regular meeting agenda items for tonight's meeting. So council and staff, does anybody have any questions, notes, etc.?
I just wanted to give a really quick reminder regarding item number 14. Those are the final board commission appointments. These are the ones that we interviewed that were not in the current district. So the policy amendment is on consent agenda tonight. So should that be approved, we'll go to item number 14. And just to give you a really quick rundown.
I'm sorry, you said it is on consent.
It is on consent. Yeah,
So it's
amendments.
okay.
Yeah.
So if there's no further discussion, we can just move on. Okay.
But the for the actual voting item to appoint the members when the new policy is in place. Kat Kaliski will be eligible for the Parks Board. Nanette Pace for the Emergency Services Advisory Board, and Clinton Weaver has agreed to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that will be the end of our vacancies, and so we'll have all the positions filled across the boards and commissions.
Good. And special thanks to staff for working that out for us.
That's 14.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And number 15 is we will discuss here shortly, and we'll know then whether or not we're going to table or move forward for that TEDC appointment. Okay, anything else? Let's move on to item number 2, which is to receive a briefing from Central Texas Council of Governments regarding a proposal for the creation of a 911 district. We have Mr. Olson and
I'm going to just turn it over to Mr. Reed for
good.
through his slides.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'll move up this way so y'all can see the screen and me at the same time.
Does everyone know Jim? And Jim, do you know pretty much
I
everyone?
think I have met at some point almost everyone in this room, but if not, I'm Jim Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Governments, an organization of which you all have been members for over 50 years. So we thank you for being a part of that. And as a part of that organization, there are state programs and federal programs that we administer on your behalf. Without making you a expert on the 147 of those, today we'll focus on just one, and that's 911. So rather than death by PowerPoint, I'm just going to tell you a visual story that you can lock onto. When 911 was created, the state of Texas proposed a fee structure to where every telecommunications device that your citizens carry or have in their home pays a 50-cent fee. And as originally envisioned, that fee is collected by the utility company, cell phone company, regular phone company. And that faucet, they pay that into the comptroller's office. From 1991 until 1996, that money came right back to us. In 1996, the legislature figured out that if they got in between that, they could take that money and move it elsewhere. They can't spend it for anything else, but they can use it to balance their budget. So in 1996, that faucet moved over into the general fund of the state of Texas. So since 1996, those 50 cents have been going in, and every biennium, the men and women of the legislature decide how much of that money comes back to our region to use for 911. Some bienniums, that's 38 cents out of that 50 cents. Some biennia, it's 23 cents out of that 50 cents. Most recently, thanks to some high profile about how much money was in that account, we've been getting close to 50 cents. So every biennia in July, my board charges me with doing a comparison. What do we get if we stay in the state system? What do we get if we get out of the state system and become a 911 district? The only thing we're asking you to consider is when I tell you what the statistics are, we think that time has come for that creation of the 911 district. So what does that do? That takes us back to what was originally envisioned. If a majority of the members of our Council of Governments say we want to be a 911 district and support it, we become a 911 district. Your citizens pay the same fee they've always paid. Their utility companies send it to the comptroller's office. And because we're a district, we bypass the legislature of Texas and the money comes right back to the region, all 50 cents. That's all we're really asking you all to consider. So why now?
So you're asking us to consider whether to take more money or less money.
Identical money, actually it's more stable money.
Right.
Take the same money, but you will get the money as opposed to
Get
the
all of it versus
legislature
not.
fiddling
Yes.
with it.
Yes, if I can figure out, okay. So right now, we are subject to what's called the State Commission on Emergency Communications. So they get 10% right off the top to run the state commission, and we pay out of that 911 trust fund to do that. We are subject to all the state's regulatory rules. There are certain things that the statute says we can pay for that the state agency says, no, not so fast. We don't want to pay for those things. Things such as radio equipment, things such as capital improvements that we currently can't pay for, but we could if we were a district. You have greater control over the funding. The funds would flow directly from the comptroller's office to SITCOG. It's a more predictable funding cycle because we know what we're going to get every time because we know what's generated in our region and we're not subject to the political process that happens in Austin. Very important, there would be no increase in the current fee. A statutorily set, the 50-cent fee cannot be raised by a 911 district. I want to say that as clear as I can so you can tell your citizens. We cannot raise the 50-cent fee. Additionally, we are not a taxing entity if we are formed. We cannot incur debt. We cannot bond debt. We can't raise taxes in any way, shape, or form. So let's look at this chart. From 04, you can see that we have steadily been getting a pretty good increase in 911 fees. We generate $6 million a biennium. So you will see that at around this biennial period, when the state started over appropriating, it was to our advantage to stay in the state system. Last biennium, $8.7 million. If we had become a district, we would have left $2.7 million on the table that the state was willing to appropriate. This year, this biennium, our appropriation came in July at 6.4. So in July, when I went to my board, they were going to have a tough decision. Is $400,000 worth dealing with the state, or is it time for us to become our own district? That's when the purple line happened. If I can get this to click forward, there it is. I'm sitting here. That says last week, because this presentation was done just about a month ago. But in early August, mid-August, CSEC announced that they had overestimated the 911 trust fund by $25 million. I don't know how. It's not my job to make sure that happens directly. I know my job is to balance to the penny. I know that every other cog that runs a 911 district has to balance to the penny. But somehow the state has decided that the 911 trust fund is $25.6 million short. So their solution is to impose a cut on all regional systems. So that 6.4 million, where my board was going to have a very difficult decision, jumped to go back to that chart. I'll figure out how to point this. 5.5. The $6 million estimated for next biennium dropped to 4.8. So we're looking at a shortfall of $2.65 million in what we generate in this region because the state made a mistake in their accounting. So I briefed this slide to the board and they said, Jim, we think it's time for you to start talking to our members about becoming a 911 district. So $2.1 million over the next biennia. What that means is that they have zeroed out all equipment replacement in the 911 centers and all IT security projects have now been canceled for the next 4-year period.
They being the state.
They being the state. So that's why now I'm going to figure this out. So about 7 or 8 years ago, Representative Aycock carried a bill, House Bill 737, which allows, any COG, Council of Governments, upon passage of a resolution of support from all of its member governments to become a 911 district. No vote is required. No referendum is required. It is simply once we gather all the resolutions, and we're in that process. That's what my board is instructing me to do. That's why I'm here today, is to ask you for a resolution of support. Once those resolutions are complete, on the day the last one passes, you are a 911 district that minute. And trust me, the state of Texas stops paying the bills that minute. So there's some strategy involved in when we would pull out of the state system. So we've been in the process of gathering resolutions. As of this morning, we have out of 31 cities, we have 25 resolutions completed. Out of 7 counties, 6 have completed. The reason we don't have 7 is Bell County is going to be our last resolution. We're asking them to hold their resolution until we know the moment we time to where we pull out of the state system after taking as much of the state's money as we can, and then turn the faucet back over to us. So Judge Blackburn and the commissioners have agreed to be our last resolution. They meet every other week. It's fairly easy to get them done. So we have 6 cities left, and you're one of those 6. As soon as we have those resolutions ready, we will continue our process of putting together bylaws and the governing documents. The statute requires that the initial governing board be the COG executive board. And I would anticipate that for the short term, that will remain the same. At some point, there may be a governing board that would be created, but that would have to be a part of a public process that the executive committee would have to talk about. You have a member on that executive committee. Within 30 to 60 days of our passing our last resolution, the funds will begin to flow directly from the state comptroller's office to SITCOG, and we will begin operating outside of the state system. So what would your residents see as far as a change? Absolutely nothing. What would you as a municipality see as a change? Initially, absolutely nothing. Our recommendation is that we operate the system identically as we do today until a reserve is built up. Because initially, right now, if I have a problem, I can run to the state of Texas and say, we have a problem, and I have the backing of the state of Texas. When you declare yourself as a district, you don't get to run to the state of Texas if you have a shortfall. So we need some time to build up a reserve. We estimate that'll take about 4 years. After that 2 biennial cycle, and we have a sufficient reserve, what your first responders will see, what your staff will see, is a proposed broadening of what we spend this money on. It can never leave outside of the 911 public safety realm. But currently, we can't pay for radio communications. But we know that we occasionally have needs in that area. Currently, we can't pay to expand capital projects. For example, if the Bell County Communications Center, of which you're a member, needed an enhancement, we couldn't spend any money there. All we can do, according to state rules, is pay for the provision of the call to the computer in the call center. So I would anticipate that in about 4 to 6 years, we would have the ability to crack that open a little bit and start to explore expanded use of that funding to enhance public safety communications. So that's what we're asking you to do. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
911 districts.
I believe there are 14 currently. 911, you can either be a home rule district, which was a home rule city that declared that when 911 was formed. You can be a 911 district that was created by statute, of which there are a couple, or you can be in the state's 911 system where we currently are. Since House Bill 737 passed, Austin has pulled out of the state system, Dallas has pulled out of the state system, Houston has pulled out of the state system, and the lower Rio Grande Valley just pulled out. If we pull out, we would be number 5 out of the 24 COG districts or COG programs to get out. There will be 12 COG programs that will never leave the state. Not to complicate this, but I just want to get that out there. They don't generate enough money to run their system. So they are dependent upon a surcharge account that the state pluses them up. We are not that. We generate more than enough to run the system, which is why we're considering making this move.
So we generate 6 million.
Yes, sir.
What are do you know the cost of what it's going to take of that 6 million to actually run our own center?
Yes, sir. We have a long history of that. It's hard to tell you any particular year. The reason for that is we have public safety answering points that we have to replace the equipment at periodically. if I'm in a cycle where 1 year I'm replacing Sansata, Texas, for example, that costs $500,000. On a year when I have to replace Bell County's equipment, it costs $6.2 million. So right now we have to bank money like a capital improvements plan to be able to be ready for when Bell County's equipment comes due. If I normalize that out, we can run the district at about $5.5 million. So we'll be operating at a surplus.
Yeah, there's still not a lot when, it may cost $500,000 to replace. Okay,
You're saying that the commissioners, Bell County commissioners, have agreed that they're going to be the last agreeing to pull out.
Yes, ma'am. Now, I've learned after 20 some odd years in this job to never say that I'm speaking for the Bell County Commissioners, but that is their intent.
Right. As of
Their
this
declared
moment.
intent as of this moment.
How can the state muck this up?
You want to really get me in trouble.
Well, no, just sort of.
I really don't know. I've asked that question on numerous conference calls and in numerous face-to-face with the 911 Commission. And I'm not kidding when I tell you, when the 911 Commission comes to monitor my agency, every penny to the penny is audited. So if they're doing that for 24 cogs in the state of Texas, the error has to be on their side of the ledger. Now, the explanation I've been given is they changed financial officers and someone didn't carry over an Excel spreadsheet from one to the other. I have a hard time with that.
Just chill.
It does. Yeah.
All it says to me is if the state can make a $25 million error and then not own it and put it on the backs of the citizens who have paid into that fee system and say, that's okay, you all don't replace your equipment for the next 4 years.
While you grow.
While you grow. And I don't want to scare anybody. We have great equipment. My staff has done a great job of putting next generation 911 equipment. We're one of the first 3 regions in the entire state to go to next generation 911. We cut over 2 weeks ago. We're all digital. We're in good shape. But accidents happen. Lightning strikes buildings. Computers fail. Companies fail that support equipment. We need to get this stabilized and have control over it so that you can hold me accountable so that I don't come to you later and say I'm short $5 million. I can tell you where everything is, where it came in, and where we allocated it.
Well, when I really said, how can the state muck it up? I meant in following, assuming that the total agreement comes through and we all pull out. How can the
Oh, I'm
state,
sorry.
this perfectly fine. I like hearing what you said also.
They cannot get in our way. Unless the legislature were to meet in one of their special sessions and have a declared item between now and the time that we would declare as a district that took away the authority, this is a signed law in the state of Texas. And I don't see any way they could stop it.
Well, hasn't the legislature sort of noticed that this is going on? I mean, they're about to lose a lot of money.
I think there are differing opinions of the state of Texas, as to whether you like state agencies or you don't. This state agency has been up for sunset several times. I'm not certain that half of the legislators might not mind seeing
Okay,
less of a state agency, although I, again, don't speak for them.
sure.
But as we go more digital, the need for a state organizing committee to orchestrate this is diminishing. And in my opinion, they're becoming much more of a pass-through financial monitoring agency than they are really managing 911. DIR, the Department of Information Resources, is doing a lot more of that because they're managing circuits and digital circuits and trunk lines that are crossing the state to try and be more efficient. CSEC has become much more of just a regulatory big brother. They do no training, they do no actual provision of 911 services. They operate poison control, which is a good thing, but I just think the legislature may not mind seeing this one become a much smaller agency.
Will the state charge a fee, like a And you got an administrative fee for collecting and remitting it back to you?
No, ma'am.
But they could pass that, couldn't they, and then do it?
They could. The comptroller of the state of Texas, I'm not an expert on their finances, but they are the collection agency for every state fee, every state licensing fee. That is that's the reason that the comptroller's office exists, is to collect taxes and fees. So
And they charge fees on like lots of them.
On most things. What are the pitfalls?
pitfalls are that on March 1st of 2022, Bell County Commissioners passed the resolution. We become a district that day. A tornado wipes out the Bell County Communications Center, and we have a $6.2 million bill. And at that point, there is an emergency appropriation we could go get from the Legislative Budget Board. Bell County is required to have that equipment insured as a part of their interlocal agreements to have that equipment. So there would be an insurance settlement. The COG has a $4 million reserve. I'm sure that would be tapped very quickly, and we would rebuild their communication center. That's the worst case scenario that I can envision. That's the only one that would keep me up in the middle of the night to making this recommendation to you and the other 39 entities in the COG.
And of the presentations you've given, everybody has agreed.
Everybody's agreed except one community balked initially. In the interest of full disclosure, the city of Rockdale was not happy. Again, I don't want to prolong your day, but the county judge in Milam County about 8 months ago made a proposal to close the Rockdale Public Safety Answering Point. He wanted to consolidate like we have in Bell County. He felt like it would be more efficient. That did not go over well with the city of Rockdale or the city of Cameron, that was going to be one of the ones who would have to lose. And so they pushed back and said no. And he said, okay, I'll let it go. Well, he let it go in May, June. And in July, I walk in and say, hey, we want to form a 911 district. And the city of Rockdale convinced themselves that this was a Trojan horse to close their piece out. So they wanted me as the executive director of the COG to give them an assurance that we would never close their piece out. And I told them I could not do that. That I'm not the decision maker. The board of directors will be, in future board of directors. And all I could assure them over a 2 to 4 week period where they considered this was that was not the intent of this. But if a board of directors comes together later on and says it's a more efficient way to do business, they could close the Rockdale piece out. And in the end, they passed the resolution.
Oh, okay.
But they postponed it. They tabled it once or twice.
So as of now, everybody has agreed.
Everybody has passed. Bell County is the only county, and that's on purpose. Oglesby, Lomita, Richland Springs, very small cities, are 3 of the ones that we are having difficulty reaching. And then we have 3 cities that have it currently on their agenda: Copperas Cove, Hugh, and it's in my paper. There's one other one that it's on their agenda to consider it. Other questions? We want you to be very comfortable with this concept.
Pretty straightforward.
Does the staff see any issues, concern?
We've, from what I understand, there was something similar to this in the past. We've had staff discussions and feel that we could work well under this model.
City managers aware of this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is.
we've had meetings
Okay.
prior to this at staff
Before she
level.
went on
Met
vacation.
with Jim. Yeah, we met with Jim and his staff and had discussions, and we've worked through our questions on it. And I think at this time, what we're looking to do is get the information in front of you. We will likely bring this back as a discussion point again. As Jim said, March is kind of likely their target timeframe. So it's not something that we've got to make a decision on tomorrow, but we do need to keep the ball moving.
What is the status of having the bylaws prepared so that we can see what the ultimate agreement?
We have met with the other 4 councils of governments who have made this change, and we're reviewing their bylaws and sort of taking what we like the best from each and putting together a draft initial set of bylaws. We're doing the same for an operating budget. Those documents, I think, are about 4 weeks out. I purposely slowed staff down initially to make sure that a majority of that the motion was we thought we were going to go district. I didn't want to waste that staff time if there was going to be big political pushback against this initiative, but we have a pretty good bow wave going. Not to be presumptuous, but we believe that a majority of the communities have said this is what they want. So I've instructed them to start pulling those together. And I anticipate we'll have those at the end of month, October, beginning November COG meetings.
And is it just a simple majority that decides whether or not we move this way or not? I mean, you either get a resolution or you don't.
The statute says, as all good statutes are, it's written very vague. It says, upon the passage of resolution by the member governments of a council of governments. So does that say all? No. Does it say majority? No. So all I can do is go by what the practice has been. And so I asked each of the 4 COGs who has pulled from the state system, how many did you get? Capital Area Council of Governments, 100%. Houston, 100%, all 248 member governments. The Rio Grande Valley has all but 2, and they've declared, and the state has said go. North Central Texas got it 72% and stopped collecting. And they're a district and have been for over a year.
Okay.
Our goal is 100%.
So based on what you told us, we already have more than 50%.
We have maybe 90,
99%.
90 to 95. But,
Okay.
but I don't want that to dissuade. I mean, you all are our members. You are our second largest city. You are vitally important to this effort going forward. It's important for us. I mean, I spent 2 hours in Kempner last month because we need Kempner. I need Temple. I'll go to Oglesby. I will go to Little Academy. We want 100%. We want to be able to slam dunk this, go to the state and say, there it is, and not have them have any reason to even balk.
Jim, you started this out saying that it's 50 cents on each phone and the state retains 5% and disperses the 45 cents.
Yes, sir.
Will the
5 to 10%.
state still 10%? Will the state still retain any of the funding if we go to a 9/11 district, or they fund 100%?
100%.
Will the district incur additional expenses from their operation that they currently have today?
I currently
Going
do.
to a district?
I currently have 4.5 full-time equivalents charged to this. The most I can see us going would be 5. It will be minor if it goes up at all. And the only reason I think I may need an additional half an FTE for the short term is every one of the other members that has done this has said it takes about a year to train the phone companies that they have to code the bills correctly, so that when they send it to the state, it comes right back to us. And that takes someone whose sole job every month is to take out the ledger and say, Central Texas Telephone Cooperative, last month you paid $6,482, and this month it was $3,000. Why? And they have to chase that. But every one of them has told me that within 6 months, that process seems to be fixed and it doesn't take that intensive.
So this brings no additional expenses to the 911 operation to take it away from
Yes,
their
sir.
operation.
No, sir. I'll be wearing the hat as the executive director of the 911 district, just like I do for the executive director of the other agencies over within the Council of Governments. There will not be an additional administrative salary and minor administrative additional cost in the inception, but I do not believe that will be a long-term charge to the project.
Thank you.
And with the existing staff, even if though you may have to add 1 FTE, as growth, assuming all agents, all areas join, and we have continued really strong growth in the area, you won't have to add more people, or?
I don't believe so. And here's the reason why. We manage at not the level of 911 call volume, because that's the call center. That's what you pay for with Bell County Communications. We manage the addresses, the trunk lines, and the circuits. So unless we were to expand the number of answering points, which I don't perceive that we'll need to, there's not that much more for us to go out and maintain and monitor. Now, there may be 26 call takers in Bell County's communications center instead of the 21, but that's still one site visit. So I don't anticipate having to staff up for my monitoring staff. I don't think I'll have to staff up for my database staff because they're already handling the rate of growth that's coming with the assignment of addresses. And I really don't think, other than the short term, our fiscal staff will need to change at all.
Well, even if you were to have to add, you were gonna have, obviously have to add regardless of who you were with growth. So it's probably 6 one, half dozen the other.
I would agree with that. Our stated intent is not to grow the administrative backbone of this district, though. Council of Governments attempts to streamline processes, not duplicate processes, and we have enough bandwidth to be able to absorb what's going to come.
Very good.
So barring any head shakes around the table here, I think what our intent is as a staff is to continue discussions with Mr. Reed and his staff, talking through some of the governance for the organization, talking through some of those things, and then ultimately bringing a resolution back to you for consideration.
In ballpark, when do you anticipate that?
It depends on when we get through. We would like to see some of the governance documents prior to bringing that forward. So
The bylaws
could be,
that can't
yeah, could be
mentioned?
as early as November, but could be December, January as well.
And that works for you because you need this by March is what you said.
I need this by March. The sooner the better, but good conversations make good decisions, and we've already had great conversations, Bren. I understand some of her concerns about recommending to you, agreeing to join an organization to which you haven't seen the governing documents of. So in concept, we're asking you to keep this on your forefront, but we certainly have no problem meeting as many times as we need to make sure that any concerns the city has with how those governing documents are formed or handled and addressed.
I've got just one other question. On the example that you gave, the tornado takes out the entire system, and you go through the reserves and there is, a large bill left to pay. How does that bill get paid? Is it split up amongst the member agencies or?
I believe, and then just in that example, you're a member of the Bell County Communications System, which is whose fiscal agent is Bell County. And so, again, I can't commit Bell County, but they have the fiduciary responsibility for the operation of that center. It's their physical center. They have the interlocal agreement with us. So I think it would be in Bell County's best interest for the short term, cover the shortfall to get 911 operational again. I mean, we have rerouting capabilities, but you can imagine 21 call taker positions being dumped on the other 7 counties. They would become overwhelmed rather quickly. So we would be probably sending some calls to Williamson County and to McLennan County. I think that Bell County would want that reversed as soon as possible. I'm confident that any shortfall there would be able to be some sort of an agreement between Bell County and the district that they would pay that money, and out of our reserves, we would reimburse them over time, we would be in communication, of course, with the full district. But I really believe that there's sufficient resources that if that worst case scenario hit, we could be okay.
There'd always be FEMA funds.
There would always be FEMA funds, there would be other opportunities. Plus, I dare say that our state representatives would have something to say about an appropriation if it were that desperate for public safety purposes, a rediversion of Homeland Security funds, something. We would come up with some way to make that whole. We would buy the equipment on time and pay it out of the district and future allocations.
I thought you were going to say on eBay.
Very good. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you for supporting the council.
Yes, good to see you. Item number 3 is to receive an electric and natural gas market update as it relates to upcoming proposed procurements. Ms. Matke or Mr. Wooten? Who's next?
Bob Wooten is going to be joining us virtually through Zoom. He is with Tradition Energy, our energy kind of consultant. The reason we're here today is to kind of maybe provide an explanation. On your agenda tonight is a request to basically go through a procurement process for electricity commencing in May of 2024. You may say, well, why are we doing that now? We're doing it now because of the condition of the market and so forth, and what the professionals in the industry say it's probably going to be doing. So now is a good time to procure long-term for a contract that starts actually in 2024. So Bob Wooten is with us. He's actually the second gentleman down there on the side. I'm not, it's kind of doing it, but he is going to walk us through kind of just an overview as to where we would appreciate your support in moving forward with procuring or trying to procure an energy contract now. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Belinda. And just wanted to thank mayor, council, staff, everybody for allowing me to present. As Belinda said, my name is Bob Wooten, and I'm with Tradition Energy. Tradition Energy is the nation's largest independent energy advisory firm, and I've been with Tradition since 2007, senior director with the firm. And before that was the purchasing manager at the Houston Galveston Area Council of Governments, going back into kind of the early 90s. So I've really had the opportunity to serve and work with local governments in Texas for close to 30 years. So it's just a very great opportunity. And again, I appreciate this. And what we wanted to talk about is just what is happening in the energy markets, things that you're reading in the papers, what's happening with prices, and specifically, how is that going to affect the city of Temple? To Belinda's point, why are we looking at securing a future electricity rate for the city now when the current contract doesn't expire until 2024? So that's what we're going to jump into very quickly. Obviously, if there's any questions at all, please ask me. Yeah, I guess with that, Belinda, just jump onto the next slide here. So the bottom right-hand corner is ERCOT, something that I think people became very familiar with after Winter Storm Uri back in February, when we had thousands and thousands of people without electricity for a very long time. That was obviously a very stressful time. And ERCOT is divided into 4 different zones, as you can see colored there. And the peak energy demand is typically driven by air conditioning load in the summer. And you'll see in the chart on the left, there's a lot of natural gas fired generation that goes into that energy demand. And that's starting to see more and more of that being picked up by wind right now, but still the vast majority of that is covered by natural gas fired generation. And although this peak demand occurs in the summer, as we saw earlier this year, now even extreme cold winter events can present new risks. And let's go on to the next slide and we'll see really what that did to the market. This really shows the effect of volatility. And that's going to be a key theme to all of this as we're seeing kind of the landscape of energy generation in Texas change. Volatility is increasing, and the common theme to all of this gets back to why we're doing this now, is that the increased volatility in energy pricing is pushing pricing up. And the volatility is expected to increase, prices are expected to increase, and you'll see how even the event that happened back in February caused a spike in energy pricing that rippled out even into 2023. And so near-term volatility is always going to also translate into longer-term price movement as well. You'll see towards the right-hand side of this, where you see some of the pricing push up a little bit higher as well. Those came from daily price spikes that we had because of volatility due to lack of wind power generation. So all of this, especially like, let's go back to summertime, where your air conditioning load is kind of the primary culprit of peak demand. All this volatility is going to pose risk primarily when demand is the highest. So summertime obviously is going to be very problematic. So when we look at supply and demand, let's go to the next slide. When we talk about our reserve margin, although the reserve margins for electricity generation appear healthy at around 15% or even higher, the baseline that's usually set is around 12 to 13% is good. You'll see that more and more of this generation is coming from renewables, from solar and from wind. These renewables don't produce energy consistently, which is what leads to the volatility. And if you look at the inconsistency of those and lump that in, the reserve margin actually looks closer to 8 to 10%. And that is a very key factor that goes into how the market assesses pricing, which again is one of the key factors that we see pushing pricing up. And on the next slide, we can look a little bit closer at how these renewables really affect everything. Wind, as we saw in one of the charts early on, wind is one of the biggest growing areas of power generation in the state. And the interesting thing about wind is that it's got a very inverse relationship to the need for electricity. Wind typically produces most of its energy at night when the wind is blowing more, and the energy needs typically peak during the day. And you can see how this inverse relationship again produces volatility. When this occurs, in particular during summer times, we see where that can really start pushing pricing up quite a bit. And so this phenomenon will only be exacerbated as we add more wind into the stockpile of energy generation. And the next slide talks about really what is happening in terms of new generation. We're looking forward about 3 years, and your blue line represents wind assets that are being built, the red line solar assets, and the green natural gas. And you can see really beyond 2021, there are no plans for any new natural gas fired power generation to be brought online. It all appears to be wind and solar. And so the same way as wind can be volatile, blows at night, and the energy needs tend to be during the day, solar clearly produces during the day when the sun's shining. And California is a really good example of a market where they have had a bit of a crisis the last few years. They've moved to more and more solar, where you get peaks in energy needs when people come home from work. They start turning on their lights, turning on their TVs. Kids are getting into the gaming systems and everything else. And that's about the time that solar starts waning. And you've then got to start turning on more natural gas fired power generation to make up for that. And again, that volatility, consistent message in the whole thing, the volatility leads to price spikes. And if we look at the next slide here, this will really show, amidst everything that we've been saying, what the opportunity is right now. It shows how forward prices have been moving for the last few years. And in particular, when you look at the effects of Winter Storm Uri earlier this year and the volatility moving to more renewables, you can see that this blue line in the upper right-hand corner for pricing in 2022 has spiked the most. And kind of the next two waves have been really 2023, 2024. The good news is the city is locked down on its electricity price through May of 2024. So this upward movement has been a little more muted with the outer years going through 2024 out through really the end of the decade, 2029. And in particular, we've seen many municipalities, many of those that we work with, that I work with directly. Galveston probably being the most recent, about a month and a half or so ago, same type of situation. Their current contract didn't expire till 2024. And they decided to lock down rate out past 2030. Because as you see this volatility, it's always going to have its biggest impact early on, and you'll have that ripple effect move out. And so this is an opportunity that instead of waiting till, let's say, later in 2022, when we're probably going to see pricing about a penny higher from where it is now, or 2023, where it very well could be a penny higher from that. And keeping in mind that a 1 cent move based on the city's usage, equates to around $400,000 annually for the city. So what we're looking to do here is to take advantage of the fact that these outer years have not moved as dramatically as the early ones, and all the projections that this increased volatility, this growth in renewables, and just in general, what I know everybody's been reading about natural gas pricing and what that's doing internationally, is going to continue to put upward pressure on prices. And so this is an opportunity to try to get that locked down right now. And the last piece that I'll cover is really more on the legislative front. If you jump onto the very last slide here. And this has been some of the different bills, Senate Bill 3 that has been passed, which was a direct response to Winter Storm Uri. And we really want to try to address things in terms of locking down a rate for the city before too much additional clarification takes place on this bill. That this was requiring power plants to winterize so that they would not have the issues they had when pipes froze up, natural gas pipes into these plants froze up during that storm. And there really was no definition around what winterize meant. They now have looked to NERC guidance in terms of what does winterizing mean. It means different things in different parts of the country. So looking at a national guideline in terms of winterization may not be as applicable to Texas. So there's still a lot that needs to be developed on that. And the more detail that comes out on that, the more cost comes out that will be, and the more that will push future pricing up. So that's why combining all these different pieces together is why we're here today, why I've had the opportunity to talk to you about this, which is taking control of what's happening right now to get a stable price together for the city and not be susceptible to a lot of this future volatility that will be pushing pricing upwards, so that we don't find ourselves several years down the road wondering why we're looking at paying 6 or 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's really all that I had in terms of going over all that background. Definitely would love to answer any questions that that council with staff may have.
So 1 cent is $100,000 of cost to the city. What's our overall rate?
The rate, well, I don't know if you're referring to the overall rate in terms of the supply cost and the delivery cost from the utility.
Yes.
So the overall rate combining both those aspects is most likely going to average around 7 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour right now for the city, and about 3.41 cents is what the current rate is right now, which is locked down through May of 2024. And typically the delivery cost from the utility that takes into account the delivery and transmission and other ancillary costs and so forth tends to be around 3 to 4 cents on top of that. And some of those factors most likely will be increasing in the future as well as they address issues of trying to get renewable power generation from out west to the rest of the state.
Thank you.
Linda, do you have anything else on this? Mayor and council, on the agenda tonight, there is the agenda item on the consent agenda on E. It's asking you to authorize the city manager or the director of finance to act on behalf of the city to review pricing offers submitted by Supply Electricity. We will be looking at a reverse auction on this too and try to procure this. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. It's not going to be, we've used a different consultant in the past that actually had technology, but Bob and I have talked about their approach, which isn't that way. And there's good in his, there's definitely, I think the approach that he'll use is great also. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Bob,
Yes.
or not.
That's okay. I just wasn't sure how we procure it. But anyway, this it's in this resolution sets certain parameters for that contract. We're going to look at going out to 10 years, but we're not for sure. It could be from 5 to 7 years, just based on of our review and what the market looks like. And also, we're hoping to get around the 4 cent rate, lock into it.
That would be getting out of our current contract and for 10 years, or at the end of our current contract, you have to have a new one
It
negotiated.
would be at the end. Ours
Yeah.
doesn't.
You like through 24, but have a new contract queued up and ready.
Mhm. I don't know, Bob, as far as your other cities, what years are you contracting? Now,
The,
5 to
the-
7?
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Or
What was that question again?
what years, how many years are you going out on a contract now?
In the vast majority of cases, especially with the mid to large size municipalities that we work with and counties, they're securing rates that typically go out to 2031, 2033, around in that range. And the key aspect tends to be trying to get a stable rate at least through 2030.
I'm not sure if we can make it, want to go that far, but we're gonna look into it.
You need to go shake mine too.
Mhm.
I think I'm paying more than that. Okay, very good. Anything else? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wooten.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right, moving on to item number 4 is for the council to have a discussion regarding our appointment to the Pitfalls County Development Corporation. Sent out a list of possible nominees 4 or 5 days ago. I think everybody's had a chance to look at that. Any thoughts?
I think we've got a good list, a lot of good potential. I would like to see, sitting on the board, the PDC board, I think it's important that we expand opportunities, have more diverse representation on there. And both minority and women. I think there's only 2 women on there at this point, so that's important. But there's also very few minorities on there as well. But they're all good candidates. I'm leaning though a lot towards Elliot Germany. I think he's been very involved in a lot of community efforts and working in the industry. I think that would kind of give him a better understanding on how important it is to expand on the different industries that we're looking at. I think he would lock into, want to just not have others to participate. There's also Tony Hill. I know that he's on a couple of other boards, but he's also very good.
Okay.
2 suggestions.
I also thought Elliot Germany, I served on the Temple Education Foundation board with him, and I'm currently serving on the chamber board with him. He is a very vocal participant, which I appreciate, and I think he's very solid. Also, of course, Perry Cloud, he's just a great businessman, very level. So he's someone that I would like for us to consider as well. I don't know Tony Hill. I've heard great things about him. Mike Emmons is someone that's cross county, that's starting to get more involved here. I don't know him very well either, but I think it would be interesting for us to take a look at him. And then, of course, Kevin Cook, I think he's great. He's very involved with TEF and appointed to the TISD task force, am I correct?
To the which,
TISD tax
I
appraisal.
think so too.
But those were just my thoughts, but I'm not settled on.
I'll just add, when I talked to the mayor about this a couple days ago, I feel really strongly that whoever we appoint obviously should have business knowledge, and not necessarily be in business, but have business acumen. And somebody who's been on boards in the city, has some knowledge of the city, I don't think this is a starter board. We have good names on here, but some of these people have not been on boards before. And other boards might be a better place to start and move towards this in the future.
Yeah, one of the things you look at TEDC, there's a board within a board. There's the overall board and the executive board that provides a lot of the leadership. And as you look down the road, the people who have brought us to where we are today, are going to start rolling out. And I think it's very important to have a strong bench of well-qualified individuals that can move into leadership roles at TEDC, because economic development is critically important to our community. I think it's a great list of people. I know Elliot Germany real well, banked him for years at TSI. I think a lot of Tony Hale and his acumen for what he's doing, and there's others, Perry Cloud, et cetera. But I would urge us to look forward to who can be part of that bench, that maybe not the first year or two, but years 3 or 4 or 5, they are, quote, officials and running parts of TEDC, because that's the kind of people we're going to need to bring on board.
Yeah, I agree that the TDC board, I mean, obviously that's one of our most important appointments that we're going to make, because that board, that's one of those boards that split. TDC has a number of appointments on that board, as well as the city of Temple. And of course, I think we are obviously responsible as the council to appoint someone to that board that will protect the city of Temple's interests on that board. Again, all those names are great. I think we're all sort of eyeing both Elliot and Tony. I've worked with both. One thing about Elliot is that he's he works here. He lives in Killeen. His family's in Killeen, etc. I personally think it would be important to have someone that both lives and works in Temple. Just especially if we're talking about protecting our interests. I know that Textile Credit Union at one point was looking to, they were looking to move out of downtown and was looking very seriously at Georgetown. And Tony was part of the group that was making the decision there at the bank and at the credit union. And he pushed to have Textile remain here in Temple. So they are moving out of town, but they're moving out west. They're going to remain in Temple, which I think is good. I also had conversations with Steve Wright, who obviously is very familiar with both TEDC and the airport board. And Tony, if you guys remember, Tony is a fairly new appointee to the airport board.
But it's his second time to do it.
That's true. That's true. But he did go through the interview process with us and was appointed. And Mr. Wright's been very satisfied with both his input and his enthusiasm on that board. And I think it makes sense to, especially with TEDC and all the work the RZ does at the airport, I think it makes sense to cross-pollinate some of those boards when we can. And to me, that's the reason I think Mr. Hale, to me, makes the most sense. So.
I like your point about residency, even though it's not a requirement. It's just an emotional thing.
Yeah, I'd
Yep.
say there's a good number though that live in Dalton.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how they made the list. Come on. So that is my thought.
So I could be perfectly content with Tony.
Likewise. Do we know
I
if,
don't know
have these
this,
people
no,
been
but
talked to?
No,
So,
not all of them.
so for instance, if we appointed either Elliot or Tony, just to pick 2 names,
Mhm.
we don't know whether they're going to accept anyway.
I think that I'm comfortable with us, picking an A and a B, and we'll approach A first. And then if that person isn't willing or able, then we'll move on to the second candidate.
So we'll
So
come back to see if we have
that's
to.
right. That's right. So are we in agreement? And I know, Judy, this doesn't meet your requirement. or your request, not your requirement.
Well,
So-
it'd be a B. I think that would be good. At least you'd be on the list, maybe in future.
Yes, ma'am. So A will be Mr. Hale, B will be Mr. Germany. Is that those head nods? Okay.
Between now and then, Mr. Chairman, move it.
I've actually talked to him about that. Yeah. Yeah, his wife is in pretty deep over there in Columbia. So. Okay, very
Well,
good.
now
Then.
maybe this will be an inducement to his wife.
Very good. Then we will. Maybe we'll have time between this being called Mr. Hale and see if we can nominate him tonight. I just we may ought to. So okay. Yeah, we ought to.
I'll just call him and tell him what happened.
Congratulations. You weren't in our meeting. You're on a board.
And you have to come at least once a week for the rest of your life.
That's right. Okay, very good. Is there anything else before we move on? Then at this time, the city council will move into executive session. Currently, it is 4 p.m. And we will discuss the employment duties and work plan of the city manager, city attorney, director of finance, city secretary, and municipal court judge. So I will end the regular session of Temple City Council and we'll move into executive session. But first, before executive session, we'll take a break.